Hey everyone, this is Erin from Morehouse Farm, and today we're going to talk about undoing the provisional cast on. So you can see I've got a couple of examples here and wanted to walk through this one that we started for the beginning of the Vanessa Knits Morehouse cabled ear warmer, in which she instructed us to do the provisional cast on with the crochet hook around the needle. And at the end, I instructed leave a few extra loops, right? Just chain stitch them with the crochet hook so you know which end to pull from. And this is the version that you're gonna see a lot around the web. All you need to do is pull on that end and they're gonna unzip nicely. That's how a provisional cast on comes out. And if you're brave like me, just go ahead and pull them. You can pick up these stitches one at a time, or if you're a little bit more worried, want to be careful, haven't done this before, or have a very slippery yarn, that's one of the reasons I love Morehouse Merino, is because it's not so slippery. You can insert your needle one at a time in the stitch and pull out your provisional cast on so that that doesn't go anywhere. See how I'm putting my point through the stitch, then pulling the provisional cast on out. Oops, went a little too far on that one, and so forth. Now, as we get to the end, you're gonna notice that we've got one less stitch than we cast on, simply because when you turn the V's around, remember we're knitting in this direction, right? We're going this way when we're working on picking up the provisional cast on. So our whole stitch on this side only shows up halfway here and halfway here. So you have to make the call, depending on your pattern, if you just want that last stitch to be whole, or you can quickly pick up this edge that is caught up in the provisional cast on as well. You can pull that loop out, and that'll give you the exact same number of stitches then as you cast on. So they match one for one now when you're going to be grafting them together. Now that may or may not help your pattern. We'll talk about that later as we get to the particular grafting section, but that's how you do the undo of the provisional cast on. Except what none of these other videos tell you is that this only works if you have an entire row of knitting or an entire row of purling in the first row of the project. And I think the biggest thing that makes us unhappy or frustrated is when expectations do not match reality, which is why I wanted to show you this when you have knits and purls together. And the reason for that is just knitting physics. If you were to take out a piece of knitting and need to unravel it, when you rip back from here, it doesn't matter if it's knitting or purling. Whichever way you're working, that will unzip. But if you try to do it from the other end, say you want to shorten a sleeve, when you try to undo it from this end, if it's a combination of knitting and purling, the way the yarn goes back and forth over the stitches, and the same thing here with the provisional cast on, you can see some are on one side, some are on the other. So when it switches back and forth from a knit to a purl, it gets wrapped through the stitch because you're bringing yarn forward, you're bringing yarn back. And if you're not aware of that when you go in to unzip this provisional cast on, you're going to be really frustrated because it's not going to pull out like the one that I just showed you with all knitting. So here, when we're undoing a combination of knits and purls, we need to understand it's not going to be quite that smooth. So here I go with the first one. Okay, see how it's coming out nice? And I can go catch those two stitches. This first one is actually not even the stitch, just where it was wrapped around the yarn. So I'll catch that one. Now I'm pulling this out. See how it's wrapped around that stitch? And that's where those of you who are in a hurry are gonna say, this didn't work. Well, it's not supposed to work that way. Remember, because you are doing yarn forward, yarn back to switch from knits and purls, you're actually wrapping the working yarn as you're making those stitches around your provisional cast on stitch, then it's not gonna unzip that way. So here's what I recommend. Pull out these chains first. Right? That part is going to come out. Right? And this is the smoothest yarn that we have in the Morehouse flock. This is the 2-ply, but notice that even the little fibers are still sticky, which I love just enough to make sure that my yarn doesn't go anywhere when I'm undoing my work. But it does also mean that I might have a few fibers to undo here and there. Next, I want you to think about anytime the stitch in the provisional cast on went directly through the stitch in the first row, pull that one out. So that's going to be every other, right, where you weren't switching. Okay, and you can do this in an orderly fashion, or you can skip around like I do, because sometimes I think I have a little bit of distraction, and that just keeps things interesting. All right, then go back to the beginning, and you can cut this or you can just pull it out, but all you need to do, all right, is pull through. 1, then 2, and you can start to pick up the stitches. You'll also notice I am working with double pointed needles. One, because I don't like the length on the rest of the weight that it gives on my hands as I'm working with long needles. And 2, the circular needle is just that much more connected, right? I only have to worry about 8 inches of stuff here. And that helps me get through this a whole lot faster. So again, I'm just noticing that this is one that's wrapped around. All I'm gonna do is pull it out. You could cut it so this part goes faster, that's fine. And then pull it out of the stitch. Catch that one, catch the next one. And yes, you can rearrange them once you get them organized, or you can just learn to read them and then do your grafting that way. Whoops, wrong end. So pull out here, pull out here. And again, like I said, you could break it if you want or cut it, and then there's less to pull out. Oops, and grab those next couple of stitches. Now coming up to the end, I've got a much shorter piece to work with, so I should be able to pull it out. Pull it out, catch that stitch, and catch this last one, and then make the decision about whether I need that extra one on the end, which is just where I find the yarn tucked through, and voila! That is how you undo a provisional cast on when you have both knitting and purling to worry about. Happy knitting from Morehouse Farm.